Hello, everybody. Feel free to turn your cameras on if you'd like. It's 1:29, so I guess we can kind of get started pretty quickly here, but usually folks kind of jump in as we move along. But thank you so much for joining me today to talk about compassion fatigue. It's something that I really think it needs to be talked about a lot more in animal shelters. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation today. And I wanted to go ahead and share some of my personal experiences I've had working in animal sheltering. And I'm pretty sure they're all very relatable experiences that many folks have had working in animal shelters. And so I do want to be considerate today and make sure that oh, hey Jess, so good to see you. And make sure that we're in our space today and we're walking into this as there will be some heavy topics discussed. And I'll try not to go too crazy into detail, but I do think that the topic of compassion fatigue doesn't come up unless we're many of us have experienced it or been had that as part of our journey. So something to really think about as we're going to talking about this today. We've got a couple more folks joining in with us. Awesome. Well, I'll first start off with if it's the first time you're here with me, thank you for joining. If you don't know me, I'm Laurie Lawless, and Shelter Behavior Integrations is my baby. It's what I started to bring my experience to the table for shelters and people working in shelters. Um, so that we can help make shelters better, right? We have a lot of different systems, and sometimes we have departments that don't talk to each other. And obviously, we have a lot of animals coming to our care that need specialized needs that our shelter systems weren't really set up for originally when many of them were built, especially here on the East Coast. We deal with a lot of very out of date buildings that are not quite up to par with the needs of the animals in them. So that's why I started shelter behavior integrations, and my mission is to really help shelters internally communicate better so they can move dogs through pathways that are more efficient and effective, and also to boost staff morale. A huge part of burnout and compassion fatigue occurs when there's a lot of staff turnover and not a lot of communication between departments and organizations. And of course, when we all face difficult decisions around behavioral euthanasia, which is a very challenging topic at this time because we're experiencing a really big influx into our shelters. So that's me. I'm Laurie, and I'm really happy that you're joining me today to talk about this topic. And I want you, as we're talking through these things, to kind of think about some of the symptoms I'll be describing and talking about, and writing some things down, or maybe some events that have occurred that you might not have fully processed or need to go back and think about a little bit more. Because I think one of the challenges and one of the reasons that many of us experience compassion fatigue is because we compartmentalize things in this field, which is very common for folks who are in first responder type positions, such as firemen or, um, you know, police. We look at people who are maybe therapists or doing triage on the street, some of those frontline care workers. And I do think that sometimes animal field falls a little off the radar because most of the time we're not experiencing direct trauma, but secondary trauma based on what we're seeing the animals experience. So, what I wanted to, before I get started, actually, what I did want to really make sure I mention is that I am not a certified counselor in compassion fatigue. I am certainly not an expert in all things compassion fatigue. And I do want to announce that I am going to be having a amazing certified human in professional coaching and counseling in animal welfare for compassion fatigue, who will be joining us in June on one of my webinar nights. I think that she is a really amazing person. I spent about an hour talking to her, and I feel as though if you're considering looking into this further, either for yourself or your staff. She also does coaching and counseling for shelters from a leadership position as well to help build a more compassionate and humane system to make sure that folks who are on the ground level are feeling less of those symptoms. So yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm here to kind of hold a conversation today, but I am certainly no means a coach or an expert on this topic, but I certainly have my own experience with it, and just kind of thought we'd talk about that. So when we discuss compassion fatigue, I think it's really important to learn the difference between what is compassion fatigue versus burnout. And that was something that I didn't really think too much about earlier on in my career, especially when working with animals who in the one of the first shelters I worked at specifically was I was feeling really burnt out about my job and my position. And if you hear a truck backing up in the background, I'm really sorry about that. I'm outside of my trailer. It's the first nice day in Vermont, so I have the door open. Um, but yeah, in that first role that I had was the adoption coordinator, and the shelter where I was working did not have a lot of great policies and procedures around different behaviors, how to treat different behaviors. This was back in about 2012 and 13, and it was my job who at that time I certainly wasn't necessarily qualified in behavior and lightly knew a little bit about dog training, not only to make sure that the dogs were being shown, I was counseling and adopting, but I was presented with a more than a handful of dogs in our care who had bites and histories of bites and severe kennel stress. And at the time, I was young enough that I didn't know any different. It was my first shelter job, and I assumed that this was kind of par the course, I guess, for working in a shelter. And all I knew is it was my job to get these dogs into homes. And where I feel like I didn't understand the difference between burnout and compassion fatigue is the that with when we're looking at something like a burnout, we're detaching a little bit from our roles because maybe we have too many responsibilities and not enough time. We might be feeling a little overwhelmed with all of the tasks that are on our plate. We're feeling hopeless that I can get these things done and accomplished. And for me, it was, can we get these animals adopted, and how, if they're not adopting and moving off the adoption floor, that I feel like that responsibility is on my fault. So, we're feeling a large amount of feeling overwhelmed in the barriers to tasks that we need to complete, and that chronic stress over time and the inability to complete tasks is what can lead to burnout. So I felt at that time when I was working with that shelter a lot of burnout because I just felt like, before I could solve one problem, another would pop up and I'd have to delay. And I think that this actually happens a lot in shelters is you feel like you set aside time to work on one thing, you have to stop and pivot, and then something else is there, and we lose track of being able to go back to that initial thing. So a project that maybe should have taken you a week or two is now extended into 4 or 5 months because in addition to working on that project, you're doing your daily care or your daily routine activities. And you are also, especially if you're in a management position, are in meetings that are on other topics, scary throughout your whole week. And you're sitting in these, hold on one second, I'm going to close the door really quick. Oh, the propane guy decides to show up my house just now. It's fun. So yeah, so it's like you're sitting in this meeting with your bosses, and we're all talking about, I don't know, something as simple as uh why isn't the hand sanitizer being replaced in the appropriate reciprocals? And all you can think about is how you're wanting to finish your enrichment plans that you started for this one dog who is having a challenge. And so, that inability to feel like you can actually accomplish tasks can lead to that severe burnout. With compassion fatigue, we're looking at the impact of long-term exposure to secondary, either firsthand or secondary trauma from some of the things we see in sheltering. And so some of the symptoms that we may feel from that type of exposure is probably burnout is included within all of that. But in addition to that, you're also experiencing feelings of numbness. You're starting to feel a little disconnected from your role, or and one of the bigger red flags when I was doing a lot of research into this that and when I, we're going to talk about some things that I did to help myself, but the feeling of you lose some empathy, whether that is for your other coworkers or potentially even the animals that you're working with. And I do have some examples in which I caught myself in a moment of loss of empathy, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Some other things that compassion fatigue, some things that you'll also notice is you're more irritated more frequently. You're feeling cynical. You're questioning your own purpose of why you're even here to begin with. You're questioning your own internal morals and if you're sitting right with yourself and what the job is at hand with what you're experiencing. So, with compassion fatigue, it is actually instead of just feeling burnt out and tired and you can't accomplish certain things, when you were moving into the realm of compassion fatigue, we're questioning why we're even here to begin with. And now that I'm able to recognize those symptoms both in myself, I can kind of stop and reevaluate. But I'm really cognizant now when I see it with other folks when I'm working in a shelter environment. So, one example that I'll share that I think would be a little helpful for you to understand a little bit of what I'm talking about is I was working at one shelter for some time and was feeling burnout because I had been given many tasks. I had expressed to my superior, manager, basically saying, I do not have enough time allotted into my schedule to do all of the things that you're requesting of me to do if I am to fulfill them to what I would consider my standard of getting done. I'm somebody that likes to make sure I'm not doing things even three-quarters of the way. I want when I'm doing something and my name is being signed off on it, that it's been vetted, it's thorough. And I just was not getting the support, I feel like at that time that I needed. That's not to say that maybe that should have been discussed as far as like time and work ethic and the amount of tasks before I took the role, but here we are, right? I'm in a position in which I'm being asked to do way too many things than I can fit into a schedule. And feeling like things are coming at me. And that's frustrating. So experiencing that high level of burnout. And then as the time went on, we had a handful of dogs who had some significant behavior challenges. And there was two or three of them in which I had real concerns for safety, being adopted to someone because of certain things that they was either in their history or I had seen displayed at the shelter that I felt could be scary, or rather would be scary and or dangerous to someone had they been adopted. And so there we had a series of animals that were like this, and I had to go to bat to really explain why I felt these animals were dangerous and shouldn't be adopted, right? None of us get into this because we want to euthanize animals, but we also need to recognize that we are in this because animals belong with people, and it's important to remember that if we are putting somebody in a compromised position with an animal and they have to make that decision for their personal safety and or their community, that that's an emotional impact on a person, and the next time they want a new dog, if they ever do again, they're probably not going to go back to a shelter, and that's the weight that we all carry. Because I have seen that personally from my private consulting and training. So anyway, back to the story. So there was a dog who I had some significant concerns about with dog aggression, and ultimately, it was decided that he was going to stay within the program and continue to do certain things, and continue to socialize with other dogs despite some of those concerns I had. And he ended up attacking another dog significantly. And unfortunately, and this is in a moment of I blame myself, I blame things that went on. I didn't have my brake stick on me. I did have citronella. I did have pet corrector. I had everything else but a brake stick. And these two dogs got into a big fight. We couldn't get them separated. I had to call for help. It took a minute or two because I had to tell somebody where my brake stick was to go get it. So they were probably engaged in a latching incident for, I don't know, maybe about 3 minutes, while we were trying to stabilize the dogs and somebody could go get the break stick. And in that moment, after we got the dogs separated, I was physically exhausted, obviously, from the situation. And I remember walking back to the medical room, and the dog who was the aggressor, the other dog, had bitten all over his face because she was obviously trying to get him to let go. And I remember them saying, "Look, wow, she really got him super bad." And I remember turning around and just saying, "Well, he absolutely deserved it." you know. And so here I am telling these vet techs, who are amazing, by the way, great vet care, that your behavior manager is over here saying that that dog deserved to be injured because he started a fight. And I remember it took me a while to calm down from that. And, I didn't even recognize that my level of that lack of empathy, because obviously I love all dogs. It's like, I love all dogs, even when they're jerks. It's like dogs are the best thing ever. And I remember in that the next day, obviously decompressing from what happened and having all these feelings of like, I knew this was going to happen. I should have stuck up harder. This dog should have been euthanized and it would have been done humanely and before everybody got hurt. And then all of a sudden I remember I definitely stared at like 3 vet techs yesterday and told them that that dog deserved to be as injured as he was. And that's not me. That is not a person who I want to be. And that's not someone who I felt deserved to be in a management position at that point. And I realized in that moment that I was feeling compassion fatigue because I had seen 3 or 4 animals go through the system where we waited too long and then something had happened and they ultimately ended up being euthanized anyway because somebody had gotten hurt. And that fourth, I think this is about the third or fourth dog at that particular location where I lost my empathy for the animal and for the people in that room. And so anyway, so I went back in and the next morning and I apologized and explained it. And, I had to think very deeply about whether I was a good fit at that shelter and if I felt like this was the right direction for me to be going in. And, that led to a lot of other decisions. But for me, it was that recognition now that I knew what compassion fatigue was because I had gone through some learning and taken some webinars and stuff that moment where I realized I lost that piece of empathy for the animals and the people I was working with, that I was no longer in a position where I felt like I was in a good space to be doing what I was doing. So, I think when you have that understanding and you know what that is, and you're not just like, where did that come from? Why did I do that? And realize it's not you, but something very internal that's happening, you can recognize that and say something needs to change. And that empowerment of knowing that something needs to change can help you with your decision making on how you can relieve that stress. So, whether that's to talk to somebody, whether that's to talk to your manager, whether that's to get yourself in some type of therapy, whether it's to take like a mental health LOA to just to like decompress a little bit from a trauma event. It's just making sure it's a really good way to notice that. So that's a personal story of mine I thought I'd share because had I not known what that sign was, I may have just doubled down on myself and said, and so that's not what happened. I realized what was going on and I knew I needed to make a change. So yeah, so that's kind of the difference between feeling that like burnout of this is too much and everybody kind of sucks and like I can't believe I have so much work and I can never get it done and I'm feeling tired all the time. I'm stressed, my body's fatigued, and the compassion fatigue where it's really testing, who you are and your whole goal and purpose and what you're doing. So I just wanted to go from there to talk about some of the things that I've done in my journey. So I've been working in animal sheltering and also private training, which I think in a way has helped me balance some of that, because I've been able to kind of step back from sheltering at times and then work with private clients and build a successful business around that. And then, be able to say, hey, I can go back to the shelter and work part-time shelter most of the time with folks. And then when I had the amazing opportunity when I was deploying and working with the ASPCA to do sheltering about 10 days a month in a really intense and trauma-filled environment, but then come home and work with clients. So that was a really nice balance for me for a while, and I was able to do that. And for me, that really helped with not being in it 100% of the time, but having that alternative. So those are some ways that I found I was able to start balancing some of that. But, even with that, they were still on both sides. Dog trainers themselves often still have a level of compassion fatigue, especially it can happen when you are working with really difficult cases and you do have people who are coming to you as kind of a last resort, and the options can sometimes be very limited. That maybe if you took that animal and gave them the right environment and they could be successful, euthanasia may not be on the table, but that's not always, and you can't go into your clients' houses and always take all their dogs. Sometimes you can't fix everything. And specifically during the pandemic, when I had a training facility, but most of the dogs coming to me had already 3 or 4 bites on them, and people were kind of at their wits' end. They were maybe losing their job. They were working from home now, which changed their dog's behavior. Their kids were now home from school and working on computers, and like the dog's whole life is turned upside down, and people were moving. I had a couple folks who had worked with a trainer somewhere else, and the dog kind of got to a place where they were like manageable, and then they had to move across the country for whatever reason, a job perspective, um and then now the whole move kind of like dove their behavior down and really regressed. And so I remember specifically at that time having a really hard time with empathizing, not with my clients because I went 100% in on that, but it was like the world around me, and specifically shelters and rescues in Vermont at that time, specifically rescues, because there was such a boom in pet adoptions. We're bringing dogs up from the south in transports and kind of dumping them. I don't want to say dumping. See, you see the lack of empathy there. They were adopting them out in high numbers to people of our community without a lot of behavior evaluation. So we were starting to get intake forms from folks who had just adopted a dog last week or 2 weeks ago, or they've had it for a month. It's bitten them 3 times. The rescue won't answer the phone. They don't have anywhere to put the dog, so they're housing a dog that's bitten them multiple times. They don't know what to do with it. And as a trainer in a facility, I'm getting these phone calls. I mean, like, what are these rescues doing, right? So very stressful time, and the loss of so again, we saw that peak of like, what are these rescues doing? God damn it! Stop just dumping dogs into our community. Take responsibility for who you're bringing up with, right? And again, that is not the intention of folks in rescue. Rescue, like their goal is to save these animals from these high intake shelters where they have less likely of a chance than they might in Vermont. But due to the demand at that time, things were just moving through a lot faster. And so like looking back, I can say I was becoming fatigued because it was getting very dumped on my plate. And because I know the skill set I have to help animals, I felt very responsible to do so. So we come up with this like balance of, I know I can help people, but if I'm not filling my own cup and taking care of myself, then that fatigue is going to catch up with you really fast. And so I don't obviously want to say the takeaway here is that like shelters and rescues are not doing a great job. Like that's why we're all here and that's why we're talking about it. But that's how I felt at the time. So the steps that I kind of took during this time when I realized this was going on was getting into therapy. And I do at that time wish I knew a little bit more about seeking specifically some type of therapist who has experience with compassion fatigue, because the symptoms can be very overlapping with the burnout. Like the similar symptoms between the two are might be like headaches, fatigue, stomach issues, sleeping problems. I was having a lot of at that time, a lot of insomnia, bad dreams, waking up in the middle of the night, increased irritability, withdrawal from people around you. Those all can be symptoms of burnout as well as compassion fatigue. So if you're not finding someone who's able to kind of find the more minute pieces, I think, of the compassion fatigue, which is like you're starting to question why you're even here in existence. Like, is what you're doing actually solving a problem at the end of the day? Or are more animals just going to get hurt and people are just going to get hurt and everything's terrible? And do I even matter? Like those types of questions are where the compassion fatigue is starting to come in. And again, I didn't realize that there really is specialized training for folks who do first responder type of therapy. So if you feel like you're experiencing these symptoms, I pivoted to a different therapist, and it was a total game changer because they understood the nuances between those and could help me sort that in my brain of how to figure out the difference between the two and what I needed to do to address one versus the other. Like one might be, you have too many emails you need to answer today. Can you get some type of triage system in your inbox to like make it easier to get through your emails in the morning versus what do we need to do for self-care and to process some of the things that you're experiencing right now due to the trauma you're experiencing from work? So that's a really important thing I didn't recognize for a very long time is like you can go to therapy and talk about it, but if you're in this field like I've been in for a while, I have been in I'm into that many therapists, but the couple times that I've been in one or two where I recognize when I'm telling them something I'm seen or witnessed, or the environment you're working in a shelter and how complex it can be, both with dealing with the people, the animals, and then also the structure, the management, and then the dogs. You're in a world that they don't really understand, and I have found myself, I think, secondarily traumatizing the therapist based on some of the things that have come out of my mouth, especially when I was working with really large hoarding populations for a long time. Jess knows this. We did some of this work together, working with dogs from dogfighting cases, and hoarding cases, and just seeing the amount of trauma from that, and then telling my therapist like certain things I'd go through or see, and they're like, "Oh my God." When you're talking to somebody about this privately, it's not something you want to hear, "Oh my God." It's like you want somebody who's going to be able to support you and acknowledge it without making it feel like now I'm just trauma dumping onto my own therapist. Great. They're going to go home and have nightmares later. And then that makes you bottle up it even more and not want to talk about it. Because if you're a compassionate person, like most of us in this field are, you don't want other people to feel bad because you told them about something awful. So that was a really important step for me. The second thing for me that helped, and again, this is my list, is hobbies that were not shelter related or dog related. Despite how much I love my friends involved with dogs and we hang out and do dog stuff all the time, it's like we get together, we talk about dogs, and then it evolves into work, dogs in our lives and cats, it becomes all encompassing. So I like to, for about 10 years, I played roller derby, which worked really well for me because I could go to practice 6 hours out of a week or 4 to 6 hours out of a week. And I had a task to do that took my brain completely off of it. I can't skate anymore because my knees, well, I don't know. I've been thinking about going back to practice lately, but that's a different topic. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to go back to like contact and hitting people, but geez, that was really fun. But I might go back and do some reffing or something to get back on skates. But it was something that I could just do that was completely separated from the work that I think drives a lot of us. A lot of us are in this because it is our lives. But it's really important to have something I that's outside of it. And like I have personally discovered I also have ADHD. So it's really, really hard when I'm focused and fixated on solving problems to step out of that unless I have something that completely like pulls me away. And so for me, that was something I needed. So now that I'm not skating, I've gotten into a couple different other activities. We've got like a hiking club up here in Vermont in the winter time. Me and my friends have some of my old friends from where I used to live have like a weekly Zoom where we all get to talk together, and they're not dog people. We can talk about other things, talking about different TV shows. And I've had a couple other hobbies that I've kind of picked up to fill those gaps, but it's really just important for me to be in a space in which dogs don't exist for at least 2 to 3 hours a week. And for me, that's really important. Book clubs, like I said, are really good. Community planning events, etc. So some things for in the moment panicking that have helped me. You can Google this, but they're called grounding techniques. It's like if you've been to any therapy for any sort of anxiety disorder, this is one of the first things that they'll teach you how to do, which is to, if you feel like you're panicking or your brain is racing, you're breathing really hard, is finding things in a room that can kind of center you and making you want to try to connect all your senses together. So it might be taking a deep breath and thinking about what you're smelling. Like, what do I smell? It's like rescue, and you're like, great, smelling chemicals. Maybe you go to look up in a like, so for an example, I had experience the other day when I was doing a vet clinic. I decided for some reason to organize like a free vaccine clinic last week with some people. So we thought we were gonna get maybe 80 people and like 150 showed up, and I had to just like sit down at one point because I was racing around and doing everything. And I remember being like, I need to just my brain is going into fight or flight mode right now. And so I went into the lobby of the little building nearby and I just said, like, it's like black coat rack, um, silver door handle, just orienting my eyes to things in the room, naming what they were, and then breathing. And within about 5 minutes, really, my whole body just calmed down, because I was really centering myself. And so grounding techniques can be really, really helpful. And it's, like I said, you can Google what those are. There's like a whole bunch of them. Counting 1 to 10 never worked for me. Like, that doesn't work. I have to tactily be doing something to really work on like combining my brain with my motor operations. And so that's very helpful. And then, for some folks, meditation super helpful. For me, it's getting outside. Like, if I'm really flustered and need a minute, I can't just kind of sit down and internally meditate. That doesn't work for my specific brain. Some people it is. Some people really enjoy yoga and meditation, sitting with themselves. Sitting with myself is not something I do really well, as I'm always in the move. So going outside and going for a walk and like really experiencing that is very helpful for me. So those are some things for me that have been helpful. Hopefully that gives you a small list to start off with, but really being able to figure out ways to kind of ground yourself in those moments where you're having a really hard time, and also recognizing the symptoms of I'm having a really hard time. So, like your heart rate is up, your everything, like the lights get really bright, maybe, you are having trouble focusing on one thing, or your memory, having trouble retaining short-term memory. Those are all symptoms that your brain is just over processing and doing too much, and you need to just slow it down. And then, yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to just talk about before I kind of like open this up at the end a little bit was what managers can do to help their staff. One of the biggest challenges in shelters is turnover. I think from a management perspective, if every time you have to train a new person, whether that's an employee, like train a brand new employee, like a 40-hour a week employee, that's like a $3,000 investment for your business. So not only does it cost you money to onboard them, it's going to cost you money to lose them because you have to onboard somebody else. Then you have to think about the impact on the animals and the staff, right? So if we have a strong staff member that leaves, that can be really detrimental to the rest of the staff. If it's a caretaker who's been there for a while and a lot of the animals know the caretaker and then they lose that caretaker, that can actually be a really difficult thing for the animals to start rebonding. Like, that creates more trauma for the animals too, because they have to learn how to rebond to new people. So retaining staff is actually one of the most critical and important things that shelter managers can do. And it starts with being compassionate and understanding some of the signs and symptoms of burnout and the difference between that and compassion fatigue in your employees, and then having a plan for those when that happens. So train your shelter leaders how to identify and acknowledge burnout and compassion fatigue. And for God's sakes, when your subordinate employee comes to you and says, I have too many things on my plate and I can't get them all done appropriately to the standard that I would like to get them done, you need to sit down with them and talk to them about how you can help them. Because asking how they can help you is not helpful. I'm coming to you because I don't know what I need to do. You're the manager. You need to help me figure out how I can get all these things done, or you need to help figure out how to delegate some of these tasks to somebody else, or we need to maybe take some things off my plate and back onto yours. But don't tell your staff, oh, well, that's too bad, because if they're coming to you for help and you don't help them, that's going to be a big problem because they're going to continue to fall into that hole. If somebody's feeling compassion fatigue and burnout, along what you're going to see is a drop in job performance. And if this is an employee that you've known for a while who is a really good employee, and then you see a drop in job performance, that is not the time to put in a performance improvement plan for your employee. That is the time to sit them down and ask them what is going on in their life. Because there are sometimes exterior life things outside of work that can cause compassion fatigue because they can't, maybe they have other things going on in their life that are not allowing them to fulfill their cup elsewhere. So many of your shelter employees, especially the frontline animal caregiver workers, are some of your least paid employees. And with the economy and the way things are, they may be having trouble paying rent, or maybe they lived in a household and had a really stable relationship and then broke up with their girlfriend or boyfriend and now have to move and figure out how they're going to pay rent on their own. They may be questioning whether or not they're making enough, if they have to leave animal welfare to get a better job. Like, there could be so many things. So instead of jumping to figuring out why their work isn't getting done, just talk to them like people and see what you can do to offer them help. But throwing them onto a performance improvement plan while they're already like going through and you've identified some of the symptoms are possibly popping up here, that is going to layer anxiety on that your employee doesn't need, and you may tip them over the edge. Where if you can retain that employee with reasonable accommodations, you're going to have a really good employee who appreciates you and what you've done for them. So then the last thing I'll say is providing safe resources for your staff. So having a budget, to be able to bring folks in who might be coaches or therapists to talk to your staff occasionally. You can supply folks with journals and have them, let them know that they can go home and write about their experiences. Calm app does a big discount for animal shelters. For some folks, that's helpful. Those, like I said, the meditation stuff doesn't work for me, but a lot of folks do. And if you feel like your shelter has a really big problem with staff turnover, bring an outside consultant in to get an evaluation on the fatigue and burnout going on with your staff would be really important to get an outside source. So yeah, so that's all I wanted to talk about today, and the different things about compassion fatigue, kind of some of the things I've experienced, some of the things that I have done. But I'm more than happy to, if anybody wants to chat or open up and share a story or something that you have found helpful that would you feel like would help some of the other folks here. I'm all ears. You can just kind of raise your hand. I'll unmute you, Sherry. Hang on. I had to ask to unmute.
Hi, Laurie. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
I'm so glad to be on today. I actually had some cancellations, and
Sweet.
I just started um, volunteering at a local shelter regularly. So, the last time you and I talked at AID last year,
Yeah.
I was like in and out, because I've done this a long time ago. And like for anybody that doesn't know, I am in Long Island, New York. So I so much identify with these dogs down south and everything that's happened. And like I heard, and identified with so much of what you said.
Yeah.
And so I'm struggling a little bit. And I do, like everything that you said, I identify with, other than the fact that I can meditate in myself.
That's great.
I'm good at that.
Yeah.
And that's really, and I don't mind being open and honest. And a big thing that helps me is my outside stuff. I'm sober 27 years.
Wow.
So that is where I learned a lot about being able to sit still in myself and being able to take a breath and do all those things that, you talked about. But this shelter, I'm just really dipping my toe in because they are coming from an aversive place.
Right.
So everything with them is like choking the dogs
Oh
and
my gosh. Yeah.
yeah, so they're just willing. It started out with they started referring me to a lot of their adopted dogs, and they were seeing a lot of success, a lot of feedback of success. So they started asking me to come in and do some evaluations. And I decided to, my give back to this community is I decided to volunteer with them. So it's just a little bit like an hour here a week, another hour here, and they're very open and receptive to like different techniques and simple things like they were like charging into the kennels, getting the dogs on leads and like dragging them through the neighborhood. And they're in a very industrial neighborhood because zoning in Long Island
Yeah.
really only puts these shelters in industrial. There's no grass. And so I just got them, very simply, just, like the Mr. Rogers hack, just talk to the dogs when you go in and take them out. And they were like amazed at how nicely that worked. Just go in the morning and instead of like, opening the kennel door and getting them on, just, say good morning to them. Go
Yeah.
in slowly, breathe a little bit, see if you can be a little gentle. And they were impressed on how much that worked. Just that simple thing, right? So
Yeah.
it's just a basic start with them.
Yeah.
But the things that I'm struggling with, Laurie, is I feel like I can't get enough information to them fast enough.
Yeah,
Like
that's hard.
yeah, I feel like I see like I'm on their update group and their Facebook groups,
Hmm.
and I see them putting the dogs in, and you're gonna love this, um, on play groups, and
Hmm.
I watch the videos, and I'm cringing, like
Yeah.
my brain hurts. I'm
Yep.
like, no, please God, don't do that. Don't put those dogs together. And
Yep.
I don't want to say anything yet because I know that's not the right thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that, like, all right, I'm not getting in there till next week till I can, meet there. And I don't want to be in,
Yeah.
although
And
I am.
there's only so
I,
much you're going to be able to do an hour here, an hour there, right? And the whole goal of you going there is to help the animals. So when I've been in situations like that, I think what would be helpful for you is to set some small goals. And the other ones, I think when the shelter sees that your programs are effective and helpful, they'll start to open up and ask you questions about other things. And I would try to focus on that. So whether it's, helping them do like an incorporated enrichment routine for the dogs, or maybe you can start teaching them like the pattern, like the Leslie McDevitt 1, 2, 3 game for loose leash walking, and get everybody kind of walking the dogs in the same way. And really starting with like small pieces like that, and just do it one project at a time and not try to attack the whole thing because that's where you'll get really burnt out.
yeah, that's where I feel like I'm
Yeah.
struggling and
Yeah.
like I want to hit my head against the wall.
Yeah. You
And
might,
you think that's,
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say you might have to do some compartmentalizing there, and that's why having, I think, some of those other activities. And then, when you feel like you've gotten your foot in the door, you can then approach them and say, "Hey, I have some other ideas. Are you open to possibly changing how we run play groups, or, something like that? That would be more well received at that time."
I mean, I think that I'm good. And if anybody has any ideas, you're welcome to like hit me up.
Yeah.
I've been really good with saying to them, like, anything anybody wants to ask me, here's my cell phone. You can text me. I've been really good with that. So I think that I'll try what you said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just like each time I'm with them, a
Yeah.
very specific small thing. And maybe I'm trying to hit them up with too much at a time. And maybe
Yeah.
that's been.
Keep it basic. And the first thing, like especially when you're trying to work on changing basically a culture of how they've been doing it for a while, is not to, they've been doing it for a while in a way that they feel works. And if you come in and start saying this is not how you should be doing it, that's usually not well received. And so if you can come in and say, "Hey, do you mind if I show you how to do this the way I do it? Or do you want to check it out?" Just kind of approach it in that way. That
Yeah.
might work really well for you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, but keep working at it and keep me updated. Or I'm sure I'll see you
Well,
at some point this year at another conference. You can
yeah. Yeah,
You can shoot me a
thank you.
time though.
Yeah, I'll be at AID again this year.
Okay, cool.
So
I hope some of you guys are going to be at AID this year too, because they have a really great lineup for speakers.
they do. They have an amazing lineup this
Yeah.
year.
Chirag Patel
Thank you.
right there. I'm jazzed.
I know. I can't wait. I haven't seen him in a million years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There is just a message here from Kathy says you think you're right about being able to talk to someone and choosing somebody with the right ear is very important. Yeah, I think that that was something that I had to learn along the way. So if I can impart that advice to anybody is finding the right person who has the experience to understand what you're going through. It's very important. And not your friends. Although your friends are great to lean on, you'll end up in circle conversations forever. Um, we're all just trauma dumping in big circles. And then yes, I think the lack of feeling safety and trust around staff members is huge. If there isn't a feeling of trust and safety, that can be very toxic. And that's when I normally suggest management teams bring in somebody from the outside to just get an evaluation and then give them baby steps to improve that. Um, and then, yeah, modeling behavior for you, Sherry, instead of telling seems to work really well too. So just going in and doing your thing, is probably the most effective way. And then once you build the rapport and the trust, people will start to ask you questions, and that's when you kind of know you've won the trust, which is helpful. Anybody else? I know we're at 2:15 now, but if anybody else wanted to share, if you have any advice or things you've done, like I said, I'm not an expert, but we will have one on in a month. But if anybody has anything helpful, this is just a good conversation to talk about how you've dealt with your own burnout and fatigue in the field. That's okay. Nobody wants to share. But I'm really happy you all joined me today. Let me actually look up the date for you guys, which I should have prepared earlier, but didn't because it's me. I'll let you know when she's going to be here. Oh, so this upcoming Monday, I should talk about that one first. My ride or die, Emily Lewis. If you guys don't know her, she's an amazing certified dog behavior consultant focusing on mostly aggression cases, but she also does really awesome shelter work with our local shelter here and is part of helping to create their post-adoption support program. So me and her are going to be she's doing a webinar with me this upcoming Monday. And that's going to be super fun. And then let's see. Marla Andrews is the woman who's going to be coming on it's going to be July 14th, Monday night. She is an amazing, has like 30 or 40 years, maybe more in animal welfare and took her journey from working in animal welfare to now supporting animal welfare employees and shelters by creating, she has like one-on-one coaching, she has team coaching, and she also does consulting for shelter teams to improve compassion fatigue resources for animal care workers and to help build more communication among teams. We're still working out the main topics of what she's going to be talking about, but in general, I think even just speaking with her in a get to know you call for like 30 minutes, I just was wishing she'd lived here with me and was like my best friend because she was so calm and amazing and was very listening and appreciative, and just that kind of a person I think is very hard to find. So I'm very excited for that. For $5, I think it'll be a heck of a webinar. So I hope you join me for that. And her company is called Humane Hearts. So yeah, so join me on Monday with Emily and then join me in July for Marla. And then actually I'm just about to announce Tom Candy's coming back on July 28th. And we're going to be talking about assessing emotions in shelter dogs in relation to welfare, which he's dubbed multi-dimensional model of assessing emotions in shelter dogs. We're working out the title clearly for that. So thank you all for joining today. I cannot say that 3 times fast. Kathy, her name is Marla Andrews, and she lives in, I believe, Massachusetts, but travels. All right, guys. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope to see you soon and shortly. And as always, just put anything in the Facebook page you want, and I'll get back to you. So, all right. Thanks, guys. You have a good rest of your day. Bye.